Can anyone in the audience give me a thumbs up saying what do you see on the screen? Are you able to see the presentation or I need to do something? You can chat and let me know, please. Perfect. Okay, so without further delay, we will get started. Just making sure this presentation is up. So myself is Sanjeev, and I'm the host for today webinar. And as you must have been following the initiative that I'm trying to lead, which is Master Your Data, Master Your Life, I've been really socializing around the topic of data, personal data protection, as well as master data management. So in this workshop, I have collaborated with an expert in the data governance area named Nicola Axum. I will let her introduce herself, and then we'll get started with some of the information that we have for today. And then also she would be talking more about how we can use data governance and really make use of those fundamentals to get started with the data security and protections. So Nicola, over to you for
Hello.
introduction.
Thank you. Yeah, so my name's Nicola Askham. I'm known as the data governance coach, and I help organizations design and implement data governance, sometimes by consulting, but quite often these days by training people in how to do data governance. And that has kept me very busy. I'm very lucky to do a job that I love, helping people manage their data better, but not just manage, but understand it better. So yeah, I'm very lucky that I love my job, and I was very flattered and honoured that Sanjeev asked me to be part of this webinar.
Thank you, Nicola. Thank you very much for your quick introductions. So what we'll do is that we will recap what we have been socializing as a part of the post, really making sure that people really do understand where what is personal data protection of India all about. And before that, I mean, I really wanted to ask and take a opinion that how many of you really were aware of this earlier? I mean, did you really knew about the personal data protection bill before coming to this? Cool. Good. So yeah, I mean, this is a draft bill. The government of India is still working on making the bill a reality very soon. So what we have learned, what we have seen from the GDPR is that it is really going to be very, very, tough if the government or company in India really wait for that last moment to happen and then start working on the bills and then start really trying to see what is there in store for them to really implement. So that's where I got this idea to how about really socializing it early, making people aware that what is coming their way and then help. So personal data protection bill is going to be a reality soon, but we have a draft version in India. What these rules really talk about is to really how do we regulate the whole data collection process, how do we use it, how do we store it, and how do we process it as far as the personal data is concerned. And the company across India and whoever is really working in India and doing business in India are going to be really impacted, and they need to comply in future. What this rule does is that it talks about many different roles. There are many terminologies. I mean, if you really read the bill, if you really take the pain of reading the entire bill, which is a 73 page of legal jargons, you might find that there are many things that is, important for us to understand. And I've been sharing those as a part of the socializing activity initiative that I'm leading. But I wanted to pick a couple of them for us to really get started, which is data principle. Data principle is basically you. Data fiduciaries, which is companies around who is basically covering, who's trying to collect data of people and then using it. And then data processor. So those people who really process on behalf of the company. Like for example, say take a Uber, and if it collects data of yours, and then it really gives and authorize somebody to process that data on behalf of Uber, then that becomes a data processor. And then the data authority, which is going to be a very, at a very, high level, who would oversee the entire bill, how it works, how it is being followed across India, and how the companies are being compliant, and what they should do to comply, and if they are not compliant, what would happen. So these are the three major roles, four major roles. Apart from that, we have many. So I have created an infographics which I will be sharing after this call, so that you can always keep it handy and know that okay, what are the different other roles and what are the different terminology which is falling under the personal data protection bill. Coming back to the goal of this bill, that is basically going to be about how do you protect the personal data of individual in India. And anybody who is trying to collect, access, and process, they should just follow what is stated under this rule. And unlike GDPR, which is more of a ownership based, it is a trust based in India. So what the draft bill is telling is that there has to be a trust between the individual and organization in terms of how they are able to share and then use the data. It has to be a trust-based relationship, so that as an individual, I don't feel threatened, or I don't feel, really doubtful about sharing my data to organization who is going to give me a services or product back in return of my data. So the crux of the whole thing, and then comparison, if you really do with the GDPR, it's basically more of a trust-based relationship that government of India is trying to put forth. There are many things that is going on. There are debates that okay, why there is no proper ownership, why it is not written very clearly that it is a ownership based, and then the data is owned by the creator or the owner itself. That is debatable and still work in progress. But at this moment, it is all based upon trust between the individual and organization. So as I discussed, who is impacted? Whoever is working in India, the companies of India, and if the company in India, if they are outside and if they are still working on providing some kind of a services or solutions or product processing data of the citizen of India, then they are also impacted. So it is about all organizations working in India and trying to process data, personal data of the individual of India. What is at stake? I mean, what needs to be protected? I mean, it is all about personal data. So for this also, I have created a very quick infographic which I will share after this call, and then you can always keep it handy and know. But mainly it is about personal data and sensitive personal data. So in the context of Indian audience here, I know there are global people as well, but in India we have Aadhaar card, like a social security number of the US. Aadhaar card is a classic example of combination of personal data as well as sensitive personal data. And very recently, you must have heard that there was a huge breach in terms of Aadhaar card. There were a lot of issues around that. And while that was happening, Indian government was really trying to put the bill across. They were trying to draft a bill and make sure that this kind of incident doesn't happen in future. So it is all about your personal data and sensitive personal data. And then classifications are like your health data, your biometric, your fingerprint, your retina, and everything else. Financial data is all our sensitive personal data, and then personal data is definitely your name, phone, credit card, and so on. So look for that infographic, which would definitely help you, classify those. That how do we start looking at your organization? That what are you doing? I mean, are you processing data which is coming under these two categories? If yes, then you may have to probably start looking at this rule very closely. So what happens if you do not comply with, whenever the rule is going to be a law? Still it is in a draft mode, but it is going to be a law soon. What would happen? It is going to be a good financial impact on the organization if they do not comply with it. It can be in a capacity of 15 crore, which is around 150 million for organization if they have failed to comply with that, and or it is 4% of global turnover of them. So that's going to be very huge stake if these rules are not followed, not complied. So what are the individual rights? I mean, what do you do as an individual? I mean, I believe that organization is made up of individuals. So as an individual, if you are here today listening to me and trying to become a bunch of people, the first set of people who is going to know about this rule in detail, then you are basically a front runner. Basically, you are the person who can be a flag bearer in the organization, and you can probably go and talk about that. Hey, I mean, this is what is going to come, and then this is how we should probably start. At least we should start looking what is next. So, as an individual, there are some rights that you have as part of this bill, and you can always go ahead and claim that working with organization, right? I mean, organization can only process your data by informing you. It is always a consent based. You have a right to ask for a correction if they have collected it and if they have processed it and it is shown or misrepresented. You can always go ahead and ask for the correction. You can always ask them that, hey, return my data. I don't want you to be process it further. So you can always ask the data in a portable format if you at all do not want it to be. And finally, you can always ask that, hey, I do not want it to be processed at all. So there is something called right to be forgotten. It is different than right to be eraser in GDPR, because in GDPR there is a way to completely erase it. But in India, it is very hazy at this moment. It is called restriction of use, not a eraser of the information. So there is a difference between right to forgotten and right to erase. So that's where few of the catches here, but pretty much it is in line with GDPR, and I would probably call it is very, very close to GDPR if you really see. So what are the different grounds of processing for personal data? I mean, as I started with, it is always the basic premise of the whole thing is that it is a consent based. It is your free, informed, explicit, and specific consent, which you should be able to revoke anytime. I mean, it's not that I am very easily giving that, hey, use my data, but when it comes to saying, no, no, please don't use it, it is very, very hard. I mean, I should be able to subscribe to it and easily unsubscribe to it if need be. So it should be very, very easy. It should be privacy by design. The system has to be built by organization in such a way that we should be able to always process it, in a way that it is easy for us as an individual to, really give consent and revoke the consent. And then there are different other purposes of, grounds of processing, like employment processing. And then if there is a law requirement, if there is any prompt action, like some kind of epidemic, some kind of outbreak of disease where organization or government need that data to process, that time it would just be processed. And then there are some reasonable purposes, like if there is anything publicly available, if there is any credit scoring need, recovery of debt and all. So those are the different ground of processing for personal data, which is applicable and mentioned within the draft personal data protection bill of India. So what are the responsibilities of organization? So the organization of India and anybody processing data of Indian citizen has got well defined responsibility in terms of how they should approach and process, store, and manage the personal data. And it has to be really fair, reasonable processing. Like for example, if I have asked that, okay, I need your data for uh, certain reasons or certain purposes, then I should only be doing that processing for that purpose only. So there has to be, and that's where the trust-based relationship comes into the picture. I mean, it is in full trust. The individual provide the data to organization that, hey, you are processing for the reason that you asked me for. It has to be, purpose driven. There has to be clear, specific, lawful processing of the personal data. You should not collect the data unnecessary. You should only collect what is required. And then notification is always done. So keeping the individual informed is a big thing in the law, that you have to just tell, okay, how you are processing, till how long you will store it, what are you doing with the data, where are you sharing the data, are you transporting the data outside the country. All those details you have to keep the individual informed as an organization. And then obviously you have to make sure that the quality of data is maintained throughout. The individual cannot be represented in a wrong manner. You should not represent what is not right. It has to be accurate, while you are collecting and processing it. And definitely the storage piece of it. I mean, you should probably be storing it not more than what is required for, and then after the use, it has to be basically not stored further. So that's where the organization responsibility comes into the picture. So this is the recap of what I have been really sharing, writing articles, and then talking to people about. I thought it's a good opportunity to recap the whole information. I'll be sharing each of the file that I just promised after this, so that you can always go back and read. But what is next? How can we really confidently confront what is coming our way as an organization of India or the individual of India, and make sure that we are able to comply with that whole new regulation, rather than again struggle like we saw GDPR. The people struggled, organizations struggled, right? So it's a good opportunity is what we feel. Myself and Nicola feels that it is a very good opportunity for us to be early and start early, so that we have a lot of time to really understand what is the rule and then how do we comply. So with that, what I will do is that I will hand it over to Nicola for her part in sharing with you that how this data governance can be simply used to get started and comply with any regulatory compliance related to data. So Nicola, over to you.
So thank you, Sanjeev, and I'm sure that the other people found that really useful, because there's a lot to get your head around when you're first starting to think about personal data protection, and to give such a good overview of the Personal Data Protection Bill, I think it's really, really useful. And I just would say that if after this webinar you want to find out more details about the Personal Data Protection Bill, I recommend you follow Sanjeev on LinkedIn, because he's shared a number of great posts on the Act already and the new requirements it introduces. So really good resources if this is something that's going to impact on you in the coming year or two. Now, I think it's fair to say that most of you listening to this will have probably heard about the EU GDPR. It was hard to avoid it the last couple of years, and but in case you haven't, it was the new data protection legislation that came into force across the EU in May last year. Although fair to say it wasn't just across the EU, it was across any European nationals' data, regardless of where that was held globally. Now, I've been working in data governance, which I said at the introduction at the beginning, for over 16 years. And for many years, every time I've done a presentation or a training course, I've made a point of saying that data protection and data governance are not the same thing. So if you go back a few years ago, the phone started ringing and people were offering me jobs on their GDPR programs. And I was politely declining them, pointing out to them that data governance isn't the same thing as data protection. But then I did a little bit of research and digging into GDPR and realized that whilst my point that data protection and data governance are not the same thing still is relevant, GDPR actually changed the relationship between these two separate data management disciplines. And it was only the first of many regulations across the world to do so. And the Indian Personal Data Protection that we're here to talk about today is only just another one of these regulations, which is blurring the line between the two. Now, as a result of GDPR, originally, I had to spend some time understanding with the new view on things, how data governance could actually meet some of GDPR's requirement. And now, with the help of Sanjeev, I've done the same with the Indian Personal Data Protection Act. Now, Sanjeev, before I go on, I can't actually see the slides. I can just see a blank slide. I don't know if everybody else listening can see the same or whether they can see the correct slides.
Yeah, you should be able to see the slide. I started playing that for you. So you may continue, please.
Yes, I can see it now. Excellent. I was just worried that I couldn't see it and I was in the wrong place. So before we go on into perhaps a little bit more detail about how data governance and can help you with data protection, I wanted to just have a quick look about what data governance is, because it's one of the most misunderstood and misused of the data management disciplines. So I thought it would be really good that we all start from the same place. Now, there's all sorts of technical definitions of data governance, and you can easily Google and find things along the lines of data governance being the cross-functional discipline of managing, improving, monitoring, and maintaining your data. But I found that whilst the words I've just said are actually correct, it's just not a useful definition to use when you're trying to get your business users engaged and signed up to your data governance initiative. So I really prefer to focus on the outcomes that you're going to get and explain to business users that data governance is all about proactively managing your data. And the reason you want to do that is to support your business achieve its strategy and vision. And I found that by focusing on that, it helps you both gain the buy-in and also make sure that you focus on the data which is the most important to your company, rather than like the data that's the easiest to fix, which is, I think, human nature to do. So, sorry, I just got a bit of a dry throat. Now, I realise that, that having a definition that focuses on just the outcome may make it easier for you to engage with your stakeholders. It doesn't exactly explain what data governance consists of. So I like to say that if data governance is all about proactively managing your data, then I believe you need a framework to do this. It will help you implement data governance. And for me, a data governance framework isn't anything overly complicated. It just consists of three things. So firstly, we have the policy. And the main reason for having a data governance policy is to give you a mandate to go and actually do data governance. And this is the document that's going to detail what your organization is going to manage and what it's going to do to manage its data better. You're also going to have some processes, because I think it's fair to say if you want consistent results, we're going to have to give people some processes so that everybody goes about improving and managing their data in the same way. And then finally, you need some roles and responsibilities. I generally find that if we don't agree roles and responsibilities up front, everybody assumes that someone else is following the processes, and as a consequence, nobody does. So we need to make it very clear who's going to do what. So on this slide, I've used this slide for many years, or at least the icons on it. I've obviously on Sanjeev's template this morning, but to explain to people what data governance isn't, because as I said a couple of minutes ago, it's one of the most misunderstood disciplines. And prior to GDPR, I went to great lengths to explain that with the exception of obviously the big brother at the bottom right, all of these are separate disciplines. They do need to be done, and they do need to be aligned to data governance. But as I said a few minutes ago, the new data protection regulations that we're seeing around the world have changed all that. And I now feel the need to say that perhaps data protection isn't quite so distinct and does have a slight overlap now with data governance. So if we move on, before GDPR, data governance was more about holding personal data securely, protecting who had access to that data, and ensuring you didn't give that data to anyone who shouldn't have it. Whereas data governance was primarily focusing on managing and improving the quality of your data. So for many people, and I would include myself in that, there was a very clear line between the two data management disciplines. But having spent the last couple of years helping some of my clients extend their data governance frameworks to support their GDPR programs, it's become really clear to me that the clear line between these two disciplines no longer exists. Instead, we have more of a mutually beneficial relationship between the two disciplines. So what changed? Well, I think it's fair to say that at the time we had the original Data Protection Act, or at least in Europe, when they came back into effect back in 1998, it was a time pre-social media and before anybody had even heard of smartphones. But today we live in a world that's increasingly data-driven, and we all as individuals create huge volumes of data every day. These days, personal data is more valuable than it's ever been, so it makes sense for data protection legislation that had to be updated to reflect our current times and current practices. So if we think that maybe it's fair to say that GDPR very much raised the bar in setting the standard for data protection legislation, then the Indian Personal Data Act looks set to continue that trend. And in doing so, they've also required that we not only protect personal data better, but that we also understand, manage, and document it better. And this is where the overlap with data governance really comes in. Now, the idea of this webinar is not to take you through the detailed requirements of the Indian Personal Data Protection Act, but I wanted to share with you the process that Sanjeev and I went through together to work out the relationship between data governance and the PDPB. Now, I take the view very much with all things that you should simplify everything, and you can add the detail later once everyone understands the overview. So we took some time to look at the PDPB requirements, and we put them into 6 buckets. And this makes it really easy for me, because I think if I can understand it, so can everybody else. So this helped me get my head around it. We put it into 6 buckets, which are data protection, and this is what I'd say that, particularly in the UK, is what our old Data Protection Act used to cover, just protecting the privacy of our customers' data and what we do with it. We have data retention, so how long we hold that data before we have to delete it. Accountability, who's going to be accountable for that data in your company, who's going to worry about it. We've next got location. Now, we've put a little icon of a globe here, but I don't actually mean where it is in the world, but also what systems is it on in your organization. And then also we have accuracy. So it sounds really ironic, but before the new data protection requirements, it was actually okay to have incorrect personal data as long as we protected it and didn't give it to the wrong people. Whereas now we actually have to worry about if it is an accurate and true reflection of the data about the person that it's held about. And finally, we have the integrity of that data. And this is about ensuring both the security and the confidentiality of that data by only. So if you think about the buckets of data that we had on the previous screen, we actually had, I've put them, thank you. If you take them, you know, you can consider them and think to yourself, well, which of these does data governance help with? So on this next slide, what we did was create a list of the main deliverables of the things that data governance gives you on one side. And then I put the 6 buckets of PDPB requirements that you can see on this slide on the other side. So we can now see that we've put them together. And I wanted to start having a look at how they might map together. So first off, I looked at accountability, and quite clearly having data owners and data stewards that data governance gives you is a good match for that. Because I think it's unreasonable of anybody to think that just having a data protection officer means that one person understands all of your data and will be accountable for it. So that's why in data governance terms we have a number of data owners who are also accountable for the data that they own. Now next I looked at the location of data, and data governance captures this in a couple of places. We have a data glossary which has the data definitions recorded in them, and also it holds which systems that data is held on. But we also have data lineage diagrams, and these you may have heard of them being called maybe data flow diagrams or even data maps. So, but what about data accuracy? Well, quite clearly, if you're worrying about improving the quality or accuracy of your data, then having a data quality issue management process and data quality reports, all both of which will hopefully result in improved data quality. So that's a big tick in the box for data accuracy. I think those were quite a clear read across from one set of requirements of PDPB, but to the deliverables of data governance. But whilst data retention is not data governance, I do believe that this is another area where data governance makes things a little bit easier, because you know, who's going to be better to determine how long data can or should be held than the data owners? So I hope that gives you an idea of how they map. But at the moment, I would expect that the vast majority of Indian companies are only just starting to consider PDPB, even if they're considering it at all. So my personal view is that now would be a fantastic time to get ahead of the game by starting to implement data governance. Not only will that greatly facilitate compliance with PDPB, but I truly believe that having a solid data governance framework will help you embed practices to enable your organization to continue meeting PDPB requirements in a sustainable manner for the future. So if you already have a data governance framework in place, this is an excellent time to make sure that it encompasses all the personal data, because you may have put it in place for some other reason. But, perhaps you're in a place where you've struggled to get data governance started, or perhaps you did get it started and your initiative has stalled. This could be the excellent opportunity you need to talk to your senior stakeholders now about how embracing data governance can help them prepare for PDPB. And remember, data governance delivers so many more business benefits than just this regulatory compliance. So I think that's an important angle to take when you're talking to your senior stakeholders. So I just wanted to help prepare you for perhaps such conversations with your senior stakeholders. I wanted to have a look at maybe what the key drivers are for organizations embracing data governance. And these include things like efficiency. I'm sure you've seen the same, but in my experience, organizations waste a lot of time and accrue unnecessary costs because of poor quality data. So you shouldn't just be worrying about the accuracy of personal data for compliance reasons. There really are genuine efficiency, cost savings, and even customer service reasons for embracing data governance. So if you think it may be accurate reporting is a good one, a driver as well. Now, I'm ever the optimist, even very early on a Saturday morning, and I believe that most people don't genuinely want to do their job to a poor standard or make wrong decisions deliberately. However, if you're given a report based on incorrect data, you could well believe that you're making the right decision when the opposite could be the case. So next up we have compliance. And I think we've probably talked enough about PDPB and how data governance can help you comply with some of that. So I think whilst it's fair to say that PDPB will go across all industries, there's also a number of industries that are regulated, and the regulations that they ask people to comply with these days often include data governance, particularly in the financial services space. So you really need to, if you work in a financial services company and you're not already doing data governance, there's probably other regulations on top of PDPB that should be requiring you to do this. Next up, one of the key drivers I like to use is reputation. I mentioned earlier that we live in a very data-driven world. We're never going to avoid that. As individuals, we're becoming a lot more aware of the importance of our data, and Sanjeev is doing a good job to make sure that people are thinking about their own data as well. So I think it's fair to say that the financial penalties of non-compliance are significant in Europe, and they're going to become significant in India after PDPB becomes law. But it's not just about the money. Media coverage resulting from any data breach or mismanagement of data is going to cause all of our companies much more reputational damage than just the pure fines. And you don't want customers choosing to go and do business with other companies because they don't trust you with their data. So it's definitely something that I know a lot of companies that I talk to these days are really, really worried about, the reputational damage of getting their data wrong. Next up, though, I wanted to have a quick look at single version of the truth. Now, there's a lot of reasons that companies should want to master their customer data, and PDPB provides yet another one. If a customer sends you a subject access request or exercises their right to be forgotten, are you confident that you really do know which records belong to that customer and where they all are? And as everyone wants to know, if you want to successfully implement master data management, you need to implement data governance over that data. Otherwise, your master isn't an accurate master, and you won't be able to trust that either. And then finally, I think it's fair to say that data governance supports you meet your corporate strategy. Being investigated and fined by a regulator it's going to be a distraction for pursuing your organization's strategy and objective for the next few years. But that's not the only reason that data governance supports strategy. It's really important, in my opinion, that the companies take the time to look at their strategic objectives and consider which of their current, they look at their current level of data quality and see, is that going to prevent them from achieving any or all of those objectives? So I really recommend that you take the time to look at your company strategy from that viewpoint. If you're able to find any areas that you can clearly demonstrate that data governance is not good enough, then that's going to really help you make the case for data governance at your organization. So I think to summarize my little part of that, are data protection and data governance a match made in heaven? Well, I think they pretty much are. To be successful implementing and embedding data governance, you need some really good drivers that resonate with your organization. And whilst I really would love your company to identify some efficiencies or maybe some customer service benefits, if regulatory compliance is the one thing that focuses your senior stakeholders' minds and gets a data governance initiative started, well, that's good enough, as long as it gets you started. I've always found that once a data governance initiative starts to gain momentum, once they really get started. So if you have been trying unsuccessfully to get data governance started, I'd recommend really leveraging PDPB and using that as a reason to get going. Over the years, I've found that evangelizing about data governance and explaining that it's best practice really doesn't get you very far. You have to have real concrete examples of how your organization is going to benefit. And let's face it, PDPB isn't going to go away. Organizations in India are going to need to invest a lot of time and resources in order to comply. And I really believe that data governance can help them do that. So instead of having separate project documentation for PDPB, the documentation on the personal data that your company holds should form part of the data glossary and data lineage that you either already have or will have as part of your data governance initiative. So I think just finally, I think the thing I'd like to leave on is to say that don't forget that both PDPB and data governance both have a wider scope than the things we've discussed today, but hopefully you can see that the overlap between the two can be leveraged to increase the successful implementation and embedding of both of them. So I really would encourage you, please make the most of this opportunity to get both of them going and successful in your organizations.
Absolutely. Thank you, Nicola, for this wonderful insight and really jotting down the points and then explaining in the way that how there is a match and then match that is made in heaven. So, yep, I mean, so data is really, part of our life, which is so much part of our life that we can't even move an inch without dealing with data. I mean, there is a trade-off between when we use data for the convenience of our day-to-day. I mean, everybody would agree to that. I mean, the audience here as well. Let's say you want to book a cab, then you have to have your data shared with the companies. And what they do with the data is something that you are worried about. And you want to make sure that they are using it for the reason that they are taking it from you. So there is a cost of convenience. I mean, you are paying the cost of convenience by money as well as giving your data. So your data is like money. How do you really want to make sure that that is being used in a full, with a compliance, with a trust? That's where this personal data protection bill comes into the picture. That's what the intent of Government of India is in putting this bill together. It is in draft mode, but it is going to be a reality very soon. So the whole idea was to bring Nicola to India. Nicola's India visit is virtual. She has been talking to the Indian audience for the first time. I've been talking to her for the first time due to my initiative, but the whole idea was to really bring the experience, the global perspective that somebody coming from Europe, having seen the GDPR implementation, they know that implication, they know what happened, they know what went wrong. They want to just share that insight and make sure that you as an individual who is part of the organization can go back to the organization and say that, hey, we need to prepare early. We need to start now. We can't wait for the last day when it becomes law and then start preparing. So that's the reason we are bringing this exclusive experience sharing session with you. So where do we go from here is the question. So how do you want to make sure that there is a head start? And now that you know the data governance is the one head start, how do we want to really use it, really start applying that for your day-to-day, at starting, looking at what you've got, discovering where is your data, discovering what are your personal data, how do we classify those, like, whether it is a simple personal data or a complex or sensitive personal data, so that you know that, okay, which need to be protected better or which need to be protected more, and what are the different policies and processes already in place. If not, then what need to be done. So that's where the whole things comes into the picture, where you got to start some kind of a data governance program in your organization if it is not already there. That's what Nicola is trying to stress upon, that we got to start with that kind of a program where we start looking at things from the wider and bigger angle, rather than hitting the what is coming our way and which is one data protection thing. No, it is a bigger part of the entire data management program, and that is one piece is data protection. So we have to see that very holistically is what the message we are trying to give today. So with that, I would let this no obligation offer from Nicola to India, that she is having a virtual course on data governance program called Getting Started with Data Governance. And she is offering a good discount for people who really want to get started on data governance, keeping in mind Personal Data Protection Bill or maybe GDPR if you are, willing to use it for GDPR. Nothing like that. It is applicable everywhere. So it is her gift to India, because she's visiting virtually to India and talking to the Indian audience for the first time and sharing her experience. This is one such offer that she wanted to really provide to everybody. So Nicola, would you like to say something about getting started in data governance virtual online course that you? Okay guys, I think we are unable to hear Nicola. I think we'll move on. So on behalf of Nicola, I think I will keep this slide open in front of you, and then we will start for taking up questions. If you guys have any, kindly put your questions in the chat section, and then we will start answering one by one as much as time we have today. If not, then we will be able to really post the answers after this and share it with everybody. So I've got a question here. I am employed in the data systems teams and a data governance specialist. It would seem that the company wants me to start from the bottom up instead of top up. Is this a good way to do it? I have understood is that it is the way you want to look at it, because to me it always starts from discovery. So for example, if you really want to start and start looking at the data protections and data security, I think the first thing would be to really discover what we have got. So in the companies of India and in the people of India, when I was talking about PDP, what I suggested is that you would not be able to manage or protect unless you know what you have got. So to me, it always starts from discovering what we have got. How do we able to really find out where is your data? What are the different systems that uses your data? What are the different classifications of data? And then you start from moving from that step to really into knowing that, okay, how different system really talk to the data, where do you share the data, and how do you take that data forward to the next system, and then that becomes an input to that system, and then become output to the other system. So if you really know that entire data life cycle, start from its origination, classification, till the time it is being used, processed, and then finally put to rest, is something that would be the best approach in my eyes. You might probably take it as per your situations, but I would prefer to start from really finding out first what we have gotten, rather than putting my heads in all directions to start with. I have got one more questions. How much time would it take? That's really that's really I would say a very good question in terms of timing. So what I can say from my experience is that it is, I mean, you definitely have to have a project timelines and then milestones. Uh, it is mostly not done without that piece, but the maturity of the data governance process is something that would give you the idea that where you are and where you want to reach, right? So it is not that you are done when you do this 1 2 3. Basically what you do is that basically you see that where are you, and there are different ways of measuring it. I mean, Gartner has really published one simple way of doing that capability maturity analysis of where you are in terms of data governance, and it is freely available Excel sheet which you can just fill in, and then hey, you know that okay, this is where you are in terms of whether you are evolving, whether you are matured, or whether you are basically at the stage where you are basically done and then following all the process. So it is not that you do 1 or 2 or 3 steps and then you're done. What you see is that out of these 2 things, if I'm doing this say 1, then I'm at a stage where I can say that I have started, and then I'm progressing, and then I'm maybe maturing, and then finally you say that you are evolved kind of a stuff. So we have seen, and personally I have seen there, we have done this capability maturity model where we know where are we, and then accordingly take a few steps to move to the next level, rather than saying that hey, I just do this 2 3 things and then I'm done. So when it comes to personal data protection, it is basically looking at whatever touches the personal aspect of the data, whether it is a personal data or sensitive personal data. So from the PDPB perspective, you have to look at all the areas, all the places, all your systems where personal data is being used, processed, shared, and that would be your target. I think we are very close to our time. I know there are some technical glitches, and then Nicola was not able to respond for some time, and I think I'm not seeing any further questions as well. Any last minute questions that you have? If not, then we will really close this for today. I am really thankful for the participation today and good question that you have asked. I will be sharing the infographics and other material that we have created to socialize. And finally, for you to be able to grab it, I have just again displayed the offer that Nicola has made for people who are interested in getting started with data governance. It must be on top of your screen, so you can just click and then grab the offer if you wish to. Definitely it is no obligation offer. It is up to your requirement and time that you want to invest in following the PDP bill, and also trying to implement the data governance program in your organization. We are really happy to have you today in this webinar. Thank you very much for your time.